The International's latest Screen Talk. Today we're delighted to welcome three leading independent producers from the UK and Ireland to talk about how they're maintaining the momentum of their 2020 slates during this unprecedented time. All were expecting a busy and vibrant year until the lockdown orders came. We're joined by Mike Elliott from Emu Films, who has made The Goob, Catch Me Daddy, Dirty God, and was about to start shooting Benediction, the new film from Terence Davis, backed by BBC Films and the BFI, when the pandemic meant the production had to be put on hiatus. A few weeks earlier, another of Mike's productions, The Show, was due to make its world premiere at South by Southwest. Elizabeth Karlsen runs Number 9 Films with Stephen Woolley. Hi, Liz. Her credits include Carol and Colette, and Liz joins us straight from a production meeting about Mothering Sunday, her adaptation of Graham Swift's novella to be directed by Eva Husson. The adaptation has been written by Alice Birch, whose credits include Lady Macbeth and the TV series Normal People. And Liz had hoped to start shooting Mothering Sunday this summer. Talking of Normal People, we're also joined by Andrew Lowe of Element Pictures. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Louise.
Who produced 12-part TV adaptation of Sally Rooney's novel, Normal People. Andrew co-founded and runs Element with Ed Guiney, the producer, distributor, exhibitor. The company has offices in Dublin, London and Belfast, and Andrew's film producing credits include Room, directed by Lenny Abrahamson, and Yorgos Lanthimos, The Favourite. Now Element is working on a TV adaptation of Rooney's first novel, Conversations with Friends. The way the talk is going to work, we're all going to talk for about half an hour, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. To ask a question, please use the Q&A button in Zoom, and my colleague Orlando is moderating this session. Let me start with you, Mike, and ask where you were with Benediction when you were forced to stop, how you've carried on working on it during the lockdown, and when and how you envision to be able to get up and running again with it.
Yeah, hi Louise, hi everyone. Yeah, we were 3 days away from shooting. Our principal photography day was the 23rd of March, which, as everyone knows, is when lockdown kicked in. We thought we were in a great, healthy position. We'd had 2 very busy production years. We had a film we shot in 2018 about to premiere at South by Southwest. The Alan Moore scripted The Show. And then we had Soul from White, a Julian Gerald film that went into the cinemas about 2 weeks before the lockdown. So that was obviously affected. And then as I say, we were sort of 3 days out shooting camera tests at Pinewood on the Tuesday. And by that time, we knew we weren't going to be able to get over the line. And it was, looking back, I was just thinking about how we got to that point. It was very quick. It sort of very quickly evolved. I remember talking to the financiers on the Friday the 13th, aptly that date. And we thought we would probably be able to get the film shot and done before anything too serious started to kick in. And then the 48-hour period after that, the whole thing just changed completely. And by the Monday, Tuesday, it was clear that we'd have to stop. So that's what we did. We sort of put everyone into, we put the film on hold. Everybody got 2 weeks notice. And then, yeah, as I said, the last few weeks really have been busy in terms of standing that down with the help of the financiers, BBC and BFI, and then working out how to keep things going so that when we can get in a position to shoot again, we'll be match fit. So that's, in terms of Benediction, that's how we've been spending our time really.
Okay, thank you. And then Liz, you were hoping to shoot Mothering Sunday this summer, and I know you've been talking with your heads of department recently, and how are you keeping up the morale of your team? You know, who needs your support the most right now?
Well, I think that, as Mike was saying, we actually closed our office on Friday the 13th. We just had a strong sense that things were going to very quickly spiral out of control. So we immediately closed the office. I mean, fortunately, we made a decision some time ago to keep our company very, very small. I've been doing this for decades, and I think we just decided that's how we wanted to work. We didn't want to be burdened by a big overhead. And so it was quite easy in terms of closing the office down. And then there was a lot of focus, which I think partly was to just provide some kind of stability to the group. There was a lot of focus on budgeting and scheduling, as if we really were about to start shooting in the summer. And I think that was as much psychological as anything else. It just felt that that was a way of keeping a framework from the old normal. And then as the weeks progressed, I think that there was a roller coaster ride of emotion, which I think most people have probably been through, where there's certain days where you wake up and you talk to the director and you talk to the agents about your cast and you go through your finance plan, and then you hit a wall and think, I'm working in a framework where we cannot see the horizon. We can't even, there isn't a line that we're aiming for because it's a future that is truly unwritten. So that was very, very challenging, but I think it's important as a producer in a production company to, you know, you have to be a leader. You have to listen to people, you have to hear people, you have to say to your crew, obviously safety is paramount, but you're trying to recognize the importance of culture as a, you know, we have been telling stories since, you know, we were standing on two legs. So it's really encoded in our DNA. It's a part of our double helix, and it's something we really have to do. So we want to continue doing that, and it's just trying to navigate the situation. So I had this idea, we have all our heads of department in place, and I just said, listen, I'm going to set up a Zoom call. I'm not an oracle. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know what's happening. There are some guidelines floating around. Does anyone want to join? And immediately all of the HODs said yes. So we just had a meeting where we talked about ambitions and we talked about concerns and anxieties, and it felt like a very good space for at least people to connect.
It's that connection that feels important right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I was really amazed that everyone, including Alice, you know, you wouldn't normally have a writer involved in production, but everyone wanted to join in and, you know, to air their anxieties, and not just personal health anxieties, but just how they can do their work.
Mm.
You know, how can a costume designer, Sandy Powell was saying, for her to try and do remote fittings on a period film, or Nadia Stacey, who Andrew you've worked with, or both of them, to try, how can Eva saying, how can I do my best work as a director if we're working in a climate, not just where you're social distancing, but where paranoia is the fabric of the group, I think becomes very challenging.
And Andrew, you in Ireland, your lockdown came slightly earlier, I think, than in the UK. You were still in post on Normal People, were you? What were you? You just about got that.
Yeah, that's right, Louise. We were in post on a couple of things, actually. So, I mean, first off, we had Herself, which had premiered in Sundance this year, and which we were still are finalizing delivery to Amazon on. So that's all had to switch to remote delivery, which has actually been working very well. And we're also in sort of the back end of post on Souvenir 2, Joanna Hogg's follow-up to Souvenir. And we've effectively put that on ice until it's sort of safe for to go back in, particularly to do the grade and the final mix. So we just took a decision that wasn't something that was practical to do remotely. But yeah, I suppose our most immediate concern was Normal People, because we were due to deliver 12 episodes to both BBC and to Hulu. And we've managed to do that, obviously, only by virtue of a Herculean effort from all our team, both the gang at Element and then all the facility companies that we're lucky to work with. And people have been amazing. And Outer Limits, our post house here in Dublin, they have worked with us to ensure that we practice social distancing, but we've managed to complete all the episodes remotely. And some of the individual efforts are fantastic. I mean, for example, our Foley artists, the night the lockdown was announced, both our Foley artists are a couple, and they scooped up their young child, brought him into the Foley studio, told them that they were camping in the Foley studio that night, spent a couple of hours recording everything they needed to get done, and then went home. So it's that was just, and that's sort of a good example of the sort of can-do attitude that we've had from all our crew. So it's been fantastic, but obviously challenging.
And then you're still hoping to shoot Conversations with Friends this year, hopefully, in Belfast?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably a little luckier than Mike and Liz in terms of the stage we're at. I mean, we weren't in the middle of shooting anything, and we're about to shoot something, which is obviously the most challenging circumstances. But our plan was to do Conversation with Friends this autumn in Belfast, and still proceeding on the basis that that's what we will do. But obviously, we are working through the protocols and guidelines that are there's still obviously a lot of them still only in draft form, but we're just trying to understand what what conditions will apply in terms of shooting by the time we get there. So our working assumption is that we'll get up and running in the autumn. Precisely when, we're not sure yet.
Mm. There seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, a consensus that sort of local, i.e. national indie productions with a local cast that can be off the ground in a few weeks and then shoot in, say, 6 weeks and then come back in again, can be more nimble than the bigger series and the studio productions with an international cast. And that these are the productions that hopefully could get into production first. Is that something you're hoping, Mike? Is that your belief?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got our own, issues and challenges. Terence being 74, for example, is clearly something we'll have to work out. I mean, I think, and like Liz, we've been doing regular sort of Zoom calls with HODs, and using the time to just try and think through a methodology with everyone for when we can get back up and running. I think we're sort of fortunate in the sense that it's a small shoot. It's 6 weeks. We've got roughly 10 to 12 locations. So logistically, it's quite simple. We're in one particular area. The first 11 days are a private house. We could, when we really begin to understand what protocols we need to put in place, I mean, some are obvious, but it will be ever changing, I'm sure. We feel we can sort of gear back up relatively quickly. So we feel that if the costume houses are open, if the props houses are open, and all those suppliers are in operation, and I guess they need the confidence that we'll be in operation in order to do that, then we're probably thinking about a 2 to 3 week startup before we shoot. So it's difficult to put a date on it at the moment because, things just, how we can work out technically, and I'm sure we've all been looking at all the various protocols that are being thought through at the moment, and you can work through the technical elements. You can think about how you control the set, how you control the environment and make it safe for crew, but at some point the actors need to be in front of the camera. So that's we just need to be able to get to a position where everyone feels confident about that. I think, as Liz said, it's also, that filming relies on a kind of collective confidence, and so I think we have to just work out what we can do, minimize the risk, and when we've also looked at things like insurance, which of course is going to be a major factor in going back to work, then we're just going to be trying to be ready for when we're able to do it.
Would you consider quarantining your cast and crew while you're shooting? Is that even possible?
I mean, to a degree, but I think we've got a couple of other projects in development which you conceivably could think in that way, that are very small scale. But even with something like Benediction, which is, it's a small indie, but it still involves day players coming in and out, and it still involves crew appearing for certain sections and not for others. So I think it's tricky to have. We can do what we can do in terms of the core crew. We can think through where we accommodate people, how we do that. But I think there's too many moving parts, really, in a way, to think that could be completely done.
I mean, we're all hearing that insurance will be a problem, and there just doesn't seem to be the insurance companies willing to underwrite anything right now. I mean, Ben Roberts said last week the BFI as a funder has occasionally allowed independent films to go into production without a bond in place, meaning the BFI acts as a de facto insurance provider. I mean, Liz, do you see that as a way forward?
I think actually it's interesting what Ben Roberts said, but my sense is that the productions this will really affect are the mid-range budgets. If you're a small enough budget, the chances are that you have fewer moving parts, you don't have big extra scenes, and you have a situation which maybe is more approaching dogma type of filmmaking. And if you are a big budget film, then you can throw money at a situation and find solutions. And also those films that exist on either side of that spectrum, studios don't bond. And the films that Ben was talking about, typically low budget films, you can get away without bonding. But it's the films, pretty much the ones we make, you know, in the kind of, I mean, the $10 to $15 million range, which, to be honest, we're feeling challenged before we went into the COVID-19 situation. Now their viability is that much more challenged, but at a budget that range, you really do need to have a bond because there's too much money that's at risk. But my sense, picking up from what Andrew said, what has really amazed me is the willingness and the desire from so many parties. I mean, we're not talking about individuals because we were not shooting yet, but certainly from financiers, from insurers, you know, this is people's livelihood and their careers and their passion. And also we do want to return to a society, or to find a way as a society. And listen, you know, they've never found a virus for a vaccine for AIDS. It's, you know, they may not find a vaccine. This may now be a part of our life, and it may be a virus that comes back each year and that some people get, some people don't get. And that's a reality that we have to look at. But we, as a species, we're not made to exist in lockdown. It just, that's not a world that we can live in. So we have to try and find a way forward. Obviously, while recognizing that people's lives are at stake. So, but I've been really amazed by how supportive. I mean, our two films that we're supposed to shoot this autumn with Film 4 have been extraordinary, and our financiers Ingenious and the BFI and just across the line. So although it's going to be hard with insurers, I don't think people want to stand in the way of trying to find a direction forward.
When you're thinking about casting projects now and attaching directors and things, are you finding that actors and directors and writers are having the time to consider new projects? Are they willing to read? You know, there was initially a bit of talk about there's so much time on their hands, they're reading loads of scripts, but is that true? Are you able to actively cast and work with directors, work with new directors? Maybe Andrew, you could.
Yeah, well, certainly in the case of Alice Birch, that's true, because she's working with us at the moment on Conversation with Friends, and she's working with Liz on her project. So Alice is incredibly prolific and available to work on those projects. But no, I mean, joking aside, we're not actually casting right now. We will start soon, but we have found that with writers has worked really well. So there's 4 writers now attached to Conversations with Friends, and they're all working very much like this, you know, in a room via Zoom, and that's definitely been the experience of our development team, that their people are more available and have more time. And you know, we've seen it also from a production point of view, where we got a quote from a prosthetics company the other day on something we're developing, and they had the time to go in great detail, break it down, and discuss it really for hours on end. And it's the sort of thing neither we nor they would normally have had the time to do, but it's time. You may as well use the time well while we have it. So yeah, so I think, I mean, the big question obviously, particularly around cast, is, you know, at what point are they comfortable to travel? I mean, for bigger names, for international cast who are primarily US based, you know, at what point are they happy to jump on a plane and come work on your project? And that's a question we don't have an answer to just yet.
I mean, turning that around as well, are you finding, has it even come up that maybe some UK actors that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to work with because they'd have been caught up shooting for 7 months in the US or on an international studio shoot around the world for 6 months? Are you finding, I mean, do you suspect more UK actors might be available to you if, you know, if the local independent films are the ones that get up and running first this year?
I think absolutely. I mean, not only is it international productions of the kind that actually before we went into lockdown, they were really becoming the favorite productions. You know, something like The Power, for example, which shoots all over the world, is going to be very, very tricky. So it's things like Conversations with Friends, and I'm sure to a degree that, you know, Benedictine and Mothering Sunday, which are more contained, that I think will be easier to mount. And yeah, actors are freer because they're not going to be off shooting in far distant places, and also theatres. You know, I mean, I think theatre is in a really, really, really tough place, but all of those performers who were booked into plays, those are not going to happen. I can't imagine the rest of this year any theatre productions will be going.
And Mike, in terms of the extra time you've now had with Terence on the film, are there things that you've actually had time to work out that you were hoping to do you'd have otherwise had to do in production? I mean, you know, what your development slate, things are going to be beautifully developed.
I think the first thing we managed to do was get Terence on Zoom, which was, considering, you know, he's not usually on a mobile phone, that was good. And it's similar to what Andrew was saying. We had a couple of visual effects sequences, for example, that, you know, we hadn't quite worked out, but they were further down the line in the schedule. So we've been able to really iron those out, and in one instance, find an in-camera version of that by, you know, Terence, visual effects supervisor, you know, Nicola and myself getting online and talking that through. So we've been able to work out various physical production elements and it's been great to have had the time to do that, rather than the director being on set all day and then you're trying to kind of do these things as you go along. So that's been a great use of time, certainly, yeah. And then in terms of development, yeah, I mean, I think we've been able to spend more time, or certainly I have been, with the writers and the directors that we've got upcoming projects with, and also thinking about which ones of those might be more sensible to advance at this stage. You know, there's one, for example, that takes place, a young director called Thomas Hardiman, with a project called Medusa Deluxe, and it's all in one location with a small cast, and that's something we will probably look to advance quite quickly, I think, when we can.
Are you in the same position, Liz? Are you having time to do some deep development on your slate?
Yeah, I mean, we have these, you know, we have another film project that Ishiguro has written, so that's also cast and has a director on board and is also supposed to shoot this autumn. So a lot of focus has gone into getting those two productions up and running. And a smaller project that we have. So there was sort of 3 for this autumn. So we spent a lot of time on those. I mean, we tend not to have a huge development slate. We only develop between 6 and 9 projects at any one time and try and have a high conversion rate. So we have had 2 new projects that have interestingly come up during the lockdown that we've been pursuing. But otherwise, yeah, we've been working on finding directors for scripts that are ready to get directors attached to, casting scripts that have directors on board. Yeah, definitely more time to focus on that.
Because, I mean, and I don't want to be glib about this, but as independent producers, presumably this is what you're used to. You know, this is, you know, finding solutions to impossible situations. I mean, preferably not quite like this, but, you know, hopefully there is a way that everyone can come out of this, not necessarily stronger, but certainly not completely flattened.
Yeah, I do feel optimistic. I just think that, you know, the human race we're sort of survivors and collaborators, and, you know, many terrible things have happened in history and somehow you find a way through, and, you know, the tram lines are never straight, but hopefully we learn something. And I just hope that some good things will come out of this, both for our industry and just for society as a whole. And, you know, I hope that when we come out of this, we really can look more towards Europe, because I think that that's where we belong, and hopefully we can all work together the way we have been dealing with the situation. And I don't know, I feel optimistic. I mean, somehow we'll get through and somehow we'll find a way forward. I just don't think there's an alternative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm going to turn to a few questions we've had in over the last couple of days. Ben Grant from Goalpost Pictures in Australia asks how producers can tackle casting with overseas actors. Andrew, perhaps you could pick up on that one?
I mean, if the question is one of actually just seeing actors, I think what we've all learned in the last 2 months is as you know, Liz says, we're very adaptable as a race, and Zoom meetings are replacing all sorts of face-to-face interactions quite successfully, actually. So I think in terms of, you know, it's we've spoken about it in other forums, but for normal people, we end up finding Daisy having looked in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, and that's just a whole bunch of, you know, recorded auditions that Lenny were watching remotely. So I think that aspect of things will still be fine. I think the bigger question is the practical one of, and again, it comes back to the question of insurance, really, you know, whether cast are comfortable and be away from home for extended periods of time, and in particular, you know, would hire, you know, frankly more expensive cast. The big concern is you fly them from the States or, you know, wherever, and then suddenly you go into lockdown, and and you know, Matt Damon is famously sitting out in Dalkey here in Dublin for the last 6 weeks, sitting out the lockdown, and seems to be having a great time. There's lots of photos of him on social media swimming in the sea every day. You know, somebody's paying his bills presumably, and that's the big concern as a producer. If you're engaging high-end cast and you can't properly insure the risk of a further lockdown, that makes it very difficult to proceed. So I think the question of casting internationally or bigger names, we'll come back to that question of resolving the insurance risk.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Ben also asks, are you, in terms of your development slates, are you revisiting scripts to make changes to locations and social distancing and that kind of thing, or is it just too early to say?
I mean, I think that we're reading everything that's being written all the time, and we've read the BFC guidelines that were somehow leaked to the trays, I don't know how. But until those guidelines are actually set, I don't see there's too much point in becoming too forensic about the decisions that you're making, because I think the situation is still unfolding. I mean, we have a general view of how it will be, but I think we really need to have a set of fixed parameters that we're working within. But I'm sure, I mean, there will be changes. You know, we're thinking about, well, there's one location that we found before the lockdown, which is only 15 miles from the center of London, but I think we could shoot a large portion of the film in. So it almost becomes like a studio type of set, because you just want to reduce movement as much as possible, and keep everything as contained as possible.
Miguel Melo Quiros from Art Media asks how you all think this might affect indie film funding. The non-profits and corporations that support indie filmmakers won't be putting their marketing dollars towards the arts right now, given what's happening to the economy. Are you worried about financing? You're always worried about financing, but more worried about financing. Maybe Mike?
Yeah, because it's been really easy up until now. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I mean, I think maybe, yeah, I think for us, I guess we've been solidly in the sort of 2 to 3 million range. And we're not, you know, I think it also goes back to distribution and maybe how that is going to be affected by this. And maybe there's a way that we can start to think about how independent film is distributed and streamed, and less of an emphasis on theatrical. But I don't know. I mean, clearly it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a huge debt, but I think there's also going to be a demand for content of all shapes and sizes. So, I think we just have to adapt and roll with it and see. I think Ben came out and sort of his webinar the other day. Sort of, I think there's clearly going to be a will from the broadcasters still and from the BFI to keep Indigenous film going and to keep filmmaking going. So I think, it'll be difficult, but it has been.
I really hope that we can return to cinemas. I mean, I just think, that nothing really, streaming is great, it's fantastic, not to criticize it, but it's sort of nothing beats the Plato's Cave. Just being together in a dark space and seeing those images flicker across the screen is a fantastic, fantastic experience. And I hope that we can still have that there coming out of lockdown and find a way for that to be maintained. I really do. I mean, the streaming has been fantastic getting us through the lockdown, and I watch everything. And by the way, Andrew, congratulations, because one of the highlights of my lockdown, my children's, my friends in New York, my 86-year-old mother has been Normal People, and it was such a fantastic piece of work. And I really, hats off to you. I didn't realize you'd done that poster during this, and it really meant, I've never seen a piece of work that has just crossed gender, sexuality, age, culture. It was really fantastic. I loved it. So thank you for that. Where was I? I'm lost now. Cinema. So I love the streamers, but let's keep cinema going too.
Yeah, and it might be that, maybe there's a kind of huge resurgence when we finally do get back to it in the theatres. It might be that people just want that experience again.
What do you think, as independent producers of, the cinemas want to reopen and they want to be optimistic and reopen in June or July? Do you think that there's a chance for independent films to go on those screens? I mean, obviously so many of the blockbusters moved out. Is there an opportunity there, or what do you think as an exhibitor and distributor, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I kind of wear a number of hats on this question, because we had a film. We just released a film on the 13th of March, Calm with Horses, with Altitude in the UK, and we had it, it was released on 100 screens, and by Monday it was pretty much gone from as all the cinemas had closed. So that's tough, and that's an example of a film we absolutely would intend getting back out into cinemas if we can, if that opportunity exists, and if cinemas want to support it. So I think there will be a window from the point that cinemas open to when the studios are comfortable releasing films on a regular basis, where there will be gaps in the schedule, and there's definitely an opportunity there. However, having said that, the sort of conversations that are going on are really about distributors offering, say, archive films for free or for very low commissions in order to support cinemas, because we're all having it tough, but the cinemas are they've fallen off a cliff is the reality. So I think, there's a big shakeup coming. I think there's tensions are rising around the question of windows. It would appear that the studios have the upper hand on that question, and we will see. But it's likely that system is going to be significantly changed in the coming months and years, and that's going to lead to change. I think it's quite a good thing from an independent cinema point of view, because I think that it will create a little bit more space for those cinemas that are stalwarts of independent film and will support independent film. So in the longer term, I'm optimistic that there will be, Liz, to reassure you, there will always be cinemas, and there will be cinemas playing the sort of films that we make. So I think that's a given. It just, in the same way we've sort of had to work harder to finance films, I think we may have to work harder to get those films out and to protect them. But I think it's both distributors and cinemas are going through a very tough time at the moment, and that's going to impact on the whole financing ecology for us all. And obviously, it's also concerned that Channel 4 is clearly under a lot of financial pressure, which at some level must feed into Film 4 in time. ditto. See, so all the people who are, particularly in the British film industry, who are supporting independent cinema are all under financial pressure, and we're unfortunately all going to feel the effects of that.
Mm. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to move to some questions from the Q&A from people listening, watching now. And there are a lot of questions about insurance. So I'd like to ask you some of those, just exchange experiences here. I mean, JC Chrissy asks, are any of the panel considering to include COVID-19 indemnity clauses in an effort to provide some cover to their production companies, saying something to the effect that we will do what we can to protect you, but it's your risk to be on set? Mike, is that something, considering you're probably going to be up and running first, hopefully?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's all the communicable diseases are all excluded at the moment from insurance policies. So I think it really comes down to how the financiers will look at your projects. If there is no immediate clear way forward with insurance companies, then I think it comes down to whether they will effectively underwrite you in that way, which, as Liz pointed out, is sort of easier for the smaller budgets, and the one that I'm hoping to get going with Benediction. But yeah, I think it will really come down to the support you have from the financiers.
Thank you, Mike. Bertram Moulier.
Sorry, just to add to that another perspective. I mean, it's such a huge question, and it's actually a global question. It's than the film and TV industry. I mean, if insurance companies will not cover COVID risk, then ultimately the government becomes the insurer of last resort. I mean, because it affects all industries, it's not just film. I mean, if we're in a situation where we've got rolling lockdowns, for example, there's business losses across the board. So I suspect ultimately, in the same way that terrorism is covered by government, ultimately, because it's typically excluded, acts of terrorism are typically excluded from insurance. I suspect any COVID-related losses will ultimately have to be treated in the same way.
Yeah, I just want to say here, I think Andrew's right. It's really a question for society too, because once we start making decisions about who can work and who can't work, because they present a financial risk to an insurance company, especially when we've seen the people that COVID affects, that's a very dangerous space to be in. And once you start gathering information from testing, antibodies, saliva tests, blood tests, that information has so much value to financial institutions and corporations. And we really do not want to be in a society where people are excluded because of age, economic background, racial background, from being able to be a part of the working body. So we need to really be very vigilant here that we think about something that is for the good of all and the good of humanity, without sounding too grand. But there are potentials here which are quite frightening. So we need to be careful about what we allow to happen and make sure that everyone can be included.
Absolutely. Bertram Moulier asks, in your development calculus, are you able to price in the additional costs on implementing the new safety protocols? And will that create new issues on closing financing and projects in your development pipeline? Maybe Andrew,
it's a really good question. I mean, it's something we're grappling now for conversations, in that we know we're going to be into additional costs. We just don't know what they are. Yeah. So, you can make a educated guess that we may have an additional 20% shooting time requirement because things are going to be slower, and so maybe it's an extra couple of weeks shooting, and there'll be on one level additional crew requirements around anything to do with cleaning and any medical kind of testing, anything of that nature. But the truth is, we won't actually really know till we get into it, and nobody really knows what those costs are. So it's going to be quite tricky, and I think what it's going to take is a spirit of partnership between financiers and producers to come up with our best guesstimates as to what we're into, but to agree that we're all in it together, and as we find stuff out, then we can relay it back, and ultimately, as Mike was saying, financiers are going to have to support us on this, and otherwise it's going to be very difficult to proceed from a production point of view.
Yeah.
Moving on a little bit, Agnieszka Moody asks, in the medium term, how do you think COVID-19 is going to impact on international co-production? How feasible will it be to co-finance projects from not one but several countries going forward?
I think it's probably just going to come to the practical aspect of making a co-production, which is just moving crew from one country to another and shipping props from one country to another. I mean, you know, the most recent co-production we did was Colette, and at the moment that would just be very, very challenging to mount that on a practical level. So I'm not sure you would be able to meet the demands of co-production spend, because the practical aspects of that might be too challenging. But hopefully, as we move on and borders are relaxed and testing comes in, we can look that way, I think is the answer. But again, I'm sort of crystal ball gazing.
Mike, do you have any international co-productions on your slate? Anything that you're perhaps now moving down the line?
We've got another project with Marlene Slaughter, Viking Film, which is who we made Dirty God with, Sasha Polak's film. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really rely on hitting spend in different regions. So it's something that is actually going to be shot in one specific location in the UK. So, I mean, it's possible we could look at that, but it's small scale again. It's very, very contained, semi-documentary really as a project. So, yeah, if you were looking at one of those bigger structured international co-productions that requires movement, then yeah, it's going to be tricky.
Mm. And I think to you, Andrew, that I know that you often work internationally in these big pan-international, pan-European co-productions. Does it feel like you'll just be concentrating on conversations with friends this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think in truth, that's where most of our energies and focus are right now, just because it feels more makeable, and obviously it's you know, it's a big production. It'll be 12 episodes, so it's enough to be kind of getting on with, if you like. I mean, we are also quite far down the road of prepping Yorgos Lanthimos's next film, and that is a bigger period film, and we have considered various locations around Europe where we could base that. So not necessarily as a co-production, although it might be co-production, but it's because of the nature of it. It will have an international cast. It's period. It just feels like that's going to take longer to figure out. And we initially thought we might be making it around the same time as Conversations, but we're assuming it'll slip a bit. We're not quite sure how long it'll take.
And this is an interesting one, something slightly different. What do the panel think, asked Louise Gallagher, about some film festivals going online at the moment? Is it something you're prepared to embrace with your films, or would you prefer to wait until cinemas are open? I mean, Mike, you're very live with that with the show.
Yeah, I mean, the show is, we've got the possibility of a festival further down the line if it happens. I mean, you know, I think it's, it'd be a real shame if we had to pursue it from a purely digital perspective. But yeah, I mean, I think haven't made any announcement and won't do probably until the end of the month about whether there's any form of festival there. I heard from, was it Matt was saying that Venice is going to have some, they do feel confident about having some elements of a physical festival. So maybe it's about, you know, if there's a way of managing it in a kind of, you know, in a smaller scale, then that would be great. If we still could have that experience of seeing them on the big screen and audiences connecting there. But yeah, the show is I think could possibly lend itself, because it has a kind of whole TV series idea behind it. Alan's film is maybe that's something that we could think about slightly differently, but it would still be great to hit a festival with it.
Yeah. Here's one from Paul Dornan, who says, do any of your projects suddenly feel too much from the old normal to move forward with? I suppose, you know, the world's completely changed in 6 weeks.
I think we had a Zoom call with an American company in LA and New York, and I said, it's so amazing how the phrase, this story feels so much of our time. And suddenly all these scripts suddenly seem to be stories of our time, whether they're contemporary or period or TV or film. But actually probably what that is about is that, you know, you respond to things, you respond to stories, you respond to films from the framework you're in at that moment, you know, and you can say, oh, I guess I was in the wrong mood to see that film, or, you know, my head was in the wrong space. Or so I think that you're always looking at things through a lens, and you're looking at stories to take you to another space, but also to reflect something about your experience back at you. So I don't know. I always think some of the films that have been the hardest for us to make, because people thought that the stories weren't relevant, have turned out to be our finest, most well-received films. I'm sure you had that experience with The Favourite. You know, it's like, we just don't know. You know, that's the great film about this industry, is that William Goldman oft-quoted maxim is no one knows anything. And it's what keeps us all here and keeps us going, but is also the thing that's so incredibly frustrating. You know, we don't know what stories are going to work. So you just have to believe in them and hope that you won't be the only Sisyphus with a rock up the hill, that someone else will join you before the boulder comes down.
Ben Hughes asks, is there a risk of a logjam later this year as delayed productions bump into shoots scheduled for late summer and the autumn? And I guess that's a scheduling one with talent as well. You know, you an actor who you hope to shoot something with over the summer, and now it looks like it's the autumn. Are there a lot of conversations going on around then? Are there real fears, or does everybody seem to be cooperating and, you know, sticking to what was planned? Maybe Mike?
We had, the reason why we were pushing through with our production dates was because Jack Loudon, who's playing young Sassoon in Benediction, was about to go on to a huge Apple series. So we had to hit some production dates. And for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been forever trying to fit actors in and borrow them from a day here and there. And so, yeah, I think for the smaller schedules, you know, once we all get going again in whatever form that is, I think for us, Benediction would probably be eased up, I think, because there's, you know, we'll probably have greater access, I think, in that small window than we've had for a very long time. But I can't remember if that was the original question, actually. But
yeah, just about the possibility of a scheduling logjam and problems with talents, further commitments later this year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that if we get going at the beginning of when production can start again, then I think we're even talking about our schedule could actually be eased. If we look at it now, we can make it an easier schedule because they're not having to probably factor in so many, you know, actors' commitments elsewhere once we get up and running again.
Is that true of your hoped for cast with Mothering Sunday and the Issue Guru project, Liz?
Yeah, I think that probably what people are doing in agents is trying to, like Andrew was saying, a lot of their focus is going on to conversations with friends, and with us it's with Living and with Mothering Sunday, because they feel contained enough to be some of the first out the gate when we are all unlocked in some form. And I think agents are trying to focus on those projects because it's very, you know, none of us really know how this is going to pan out, and the guidelines will help us, but they're just guidelines. And I think that we really don't know when international productions will get going, when theatre will be up and running. If theatre is up and running, will they put shows that were scheduled for the autumn into the, it's such a, and it's too enormous to look at the big picture. All you can do is just, everything has become about the small, which is strange because we're in a global world and this is a global problem, and we looked at things globally in terms of big global stories that traveled, and now everyone's in a position where we're all in it together, but it's about the small, almost, the things that are manageable for now.
got a final question here from Suzanne Gilgood. That's an interesting one. She says, I have a feature project that is in late stage development that I'm now considering repackaging as a high-end drama series due to the current landscape to take to the VOD platforms. Should I hold my resolve and keep its feature film identity, or respond to the corona changing landscape and jump on the demand for content from Netflix? To you, Andrew.
Well, I mean, I think first off, I think the story will determine what medium it best lends itself to. I don't know that you can simply repackage a film as a television series in that way. Having said that, we were before To Normal People, we were developing Conversation with Friends as a film, and we've had it in development for some time as a film. And it was only through our experience of making Normal People that we came to realize that actually there was arguably a bigger opportunity to reconceive Conversations as a TV series, partly because we didn't crack it as a film. So we tried, but didn't make it. I suppose in more general terms, it is sadly the reality, as speaking as both film and TV producer, that the economics of making television are far more interesting right now than film. Feature film is a very tough business, and it's a very tough business to make any money out of, if you're being blunt about it. So often the experience of producing a film is it takes a long time, and you end up deferring a portion of your fees, and the possibility that you may see some commercial return from the release of your film is quite remote in most cases. So I think as a more general question, where are you better off putting your energies if you have projects that are suitable for both mediums? Television is certainly an exciting opportunity right now. But equally, I think if you have something that you've developed as a film and it is a film, then you should stick to your guns and make it as a film.
Liz, do you have any advice on that?
I think I would start with the same thing. It's really the story that's going to dictate. And I think that if people say if you try and chase the money, or you try and chase the platform, that's not a road that really leads to fruition. I think it has to be about the story, and it has to be about the talent and how you tell that story and tell it to the best of your, whatever it is, whether it's a genre film or a drama, a romantic comedy. I think something needs to know its identity. It could be a non-narrative art house piece, but it needs to know what it's setting out to do. And also films, independent films, there are platforms where those are being shown if things really are locked down still. There's plenty of great platforms that are showing independent films.
Thank you. I think we're at our last question. It's an interesting one. Becky Rooney asked, do you think this situation will make the industry more family friendly, in that production companies will be more open to virtual production meetings and flexible working?
I would say definitely. I mean, it's interesting. We as a company, our offices are Dublin, London, and Belfast. So we have been working remotely in a sense for a long time. We have our weekly development meetings on video conferencing for at least the last 2 years. So in that sense, the transition's been pretty seamless. But I think it's quite revealing for us all just how much work we can get done working remotely in this way. So I suspect we'll see an awful lot more willingness to meet people remotely by video conference rather than traveling, sometimes some instances to have an initial meeting. I still think, going back to Louise Gallagher's question earlier about festivals, and hi to Louise, we distributed our film Bump Along the Way last year, a great movie. But one of the most important things about festivals for me is just meeting people and connecting with people who I know in the industry and making new contacts. And I don't think any amount of video conferencing will improve on that. So I really do hope and pray the festivals become a thing again quite quickly, and we can all get out and again. And I think that's crucial. But otherwise, pitching ideas, having story conferences, I think all of that can be done remotely. That's something we've all established in the last 2 months.
Do you agree, Liz? Do you think this is a moment to make everything more flexible and family friendly?
I think there's always upsides to downsides, and there are upsides that will emerge from this, both economic implications, as you no longer have to fly people all around the world. I mean, perhaps even for press junkets and things, more can be done remotely, which is obviously good for the planet as well, and much easier for people's personal lives, for their health. So there are positive things that will come. But yeah, I agree. I mean, festivals, it's about groups of people coming together and sharing ideas, you know, breaking bread, meeting each other, and also not to forget about the economies of those towns where these festivals are held. Is that some of the smaller festivals, they've really become a lifeline for the economies of those towns and cultural exchange. So something like, you know, many smaller festivals, Dinar, for example, for that town, it means an awful lot to have that festival stage there. So it's important that we get festivals back as spaces. Just they're so pleasurable and so much fun, and they do mean something beyond our encounter with them.
Very much so. Mike, do you have any final words?
On that particular thing about becoming a more friendly and sort of
Flexible,
a nicer environment. But yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly been. Well, I can remember working on, when I was a first AD, with the Danish and how they approached their shoots. And I did a couple of Lars von Trier films, and they used to shoot only for five days a week, and they'd only shoot for 8 or 9 hours. And on a Friday, they asked if they could have a short day every Friday as well. So they managed to make their films like that. So I've always been on a mission to try and do something similar. But and I think, but joke aside, I think also there was definitely more of an agenda about making the workplace just a nicer environment. I think that has been, you know, very much the last couple of years. That's been something on, you know, that's been coming into practice more and more. So hopefully it will accelerate that, and it will make us, maybe have, you know, take pause to think about it a bit more. Yeah.
Let's all be more Danish. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for. Thank you, Mike, Liz, Andrew. Unless there's anything else you'd like to say, we're pretty much, that's our time. This video will be up on Screen Daily on demand, free to air, either later today or tomorrow. And we can all look forward next week to the Screen Talk, which will be on the worldwide location landscape, which will be different once we emerge from COVID-19. And we're going to look at how production companies can prepare for that. It's scheduled to take place on Wednesday, May the 13th at 4:30 British Summer Time, and full details will be available on screendaily.com tomorrow. So again, thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you to everybody for coming here to listen to us, and to better times. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.